this is really something else to see this. And again, I want to stress, I appreciate that they're doing this, and they're not playing favorites when it comes to who gets the security grant and who doesn't. And I realize they're doing this in response to an attack on a family in London. But if something happens to the folks at Grace Life, and I've been there, I've seen people come out to protest the church. If you see some of the online commentary directed at the church, they're called a hate cult. They are, treated as though they are like Waco. If something happens to them, how much of that has to do with the government rhetoric directed at them as these dangerous super spreaders who don't care about their fellow man over these past months? Alberta today, Jason Kenney made this big announcement that they're giving a security grant to protect religious and cultural organizations against hate crime. And this is in response to the attack in London. This includes places of worship, temples, synagogues, community centers, Indigenous friendship centers, ceremonial facilities, and monuments. And the funding can be used for things like security and technology improvements, as well as staff training. And Jason Kenney said, we tragically witnessed this week religious and ethnic minorities in Canada remain at risk of being targeted with hate-motivated crime. These cowardly acts of bigotry have no place in our province. Alberta's government stands shoulder to shoulder with these communities and is proud to deliver on our election commitment to keep them safe. And they'll get up to, I guess it's $500,000 available this year, and $10,000 to assist with security assessments and training, and $90,000 for the purchase and installation of, this is my favorite, security infrastructure such as alarms, gates, motion detectors, and security systems. So basically what they have going on down at Grace Life, but a little different, because it'll be to protect themselves against hate crimes, as opposed to what's happening at Grace Life, which is the province protecting Christians from going to worship. And I thought this was an interesting and a slightly tone-deaf thing for the Alberta government to do. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate what they're doing here. I think it is important to protect our religious institutions from hate crimes right across the board. My problem is that this government is walking around waving the flag of protecting religious freedom and religious institutions when they themselves have put 3 pastors in jail and confiscated a church. Who will protect our religious institutions from the government here?
Fantastic point, Sheila. Yeah, because what happens when the hate crime isn't coming from some deranged individual, but it's coming from a level of government?
Alberta Health Services.
Yeah.
Alberta Health Services bigotry.
Yeah, and like you said, I guess Grace Life, in the large scheme of things, they're now ahead of the curve. They've got that security fence. The only problem is just one hitch, right, Sheila? The congregants aren't allowed on the other side of the fence. So even though they continue to worship, and thank goodness for that. Yeah, but you know what? To me, again, Sheila, this is about politicizing a heinous crime, a tragedy, and shame on them. This shouldn't be done. It is the kind of virtue signaling you typically see from the left, but now the right's doing it too. And as
go ahead.
Oh no, and maybe that's one of the reasons, as we discussed earlier, that when you look at the 3 lowest polling premiers in Canada, it's Kenney, Ford, and Pallister, all Conservatives. Supposedly.
Yep, exactly. And that's because they've decided that they all need a new base.
Oh, yes.
This is really something else to see. This, and again, I want to stress, I appreciate that they're doing this, and they're not playing favorites when it comes to who gets the security grant and who doesn't. And I realize they're doing this in response to an attack on a family in London. But if something happens to the folks at Grace Life, and I've been there, I've seen people come out to protest the church. If you see some of the online commentary directed at the church, they're called a hate cult. They are, treated as though they are like Waco. If something happens to them, how much of that has to do with the government rhetoric directed at them as these dangerous super spreaders who don't care about their fellow man over these past months?
Oh, and Sheila, I've experienced the exact same thing. Remember last month at Church of God in Elmer, Ontario, when there was a demonstration across the street by members of the trans community of Elmer. Elmer's 7,000 people. As far as I could determine, the trans community is 2 people. And when I was covering that, and remember, this is not me trespassing on private property. I'm on a public street. 2 members of the Elmer Fudd Police Department came over because the transgender people called them and told me that if I continued filming, I would be arrested. And again, I'm in a public place and they are there doing a demonstration, ostensibly to get coverage. The world's upside down, Sheila.
Yeah, I mean, I was at Grace Life, I think it was live with Ezra, and a guy with like a pro-Satan sign drove by and was yelling at women and children.
Wow.
And, these people get whipped up into a bloodlust because they are going to the University of Television every single day, listening to this fear-mongering from their TV about how everybody's going to die if you don't wear a mask, or if you want to go to church, then you're killing your neighbors. And then they see the heavy-handed tactics the government is taking with these churches, which somebody who's not a deep critical thinker would think, okay, well, the response is the response that it is because the threat is so deadly.
Yeah.
It must be so bad that it justifies jail and confiscating property and fencing the church away from its congregants and driving them underground. The threat of the virus must be equal to the enforcement measures the government is taking, when clearly it's not. And that's my concern, is that, when I see people saying, confiscate the church, lock it up, burn it down, how much of that is driven by what the government has done to Grace Life?
And I've lost count of how many times I've said this question to you, Sheila, but again, what is Jason Kenney? What is the ostensible policy reason here in him doing this?
Well, it's in response to London, obviously, at least the new grant is, but I can't get over them making this announcement today while Grace Life is being forced to sue the province for the return of their building. Yeah. That's what's happening. They are suing the province right now because even though we've moved into stage 2 reopening, they still can't get their church back. And this is the announcement the province is making today. Where are your communications people, Jason Kenney's government? What's wrong with you? This is ridiculous. Hi friends, what you just saw there is a clip from our Rebel News daily live stream show. It's fun, it's fast, and it's completely unscripted, so you never really know what you're going to get. Just go to rebelnews.com/livestream